keep yourself muted. If you have questions during the event, please drop them in the chat. We'll collect them and then ask them to the speaker. You're also free to raise your hand during the Q&A section if you'd like to speak directly to Wes. So I'm now very pleased to introduce our speaker today, Wes Craiglow. Wes Craiglow is the Executive Director of the Urban Land Institute's Northwest Arkansas District Council. In this role, Wes is responsible for uniting the mission of ULI with the development trends and land use leaders of this dynamic and rapidly growing corner of America's heartland. Prior to ULI, Wes served for 10 years as the Deputy Director of Planning and Development for the City of Conway, Arkansas. He focused on the city's long-range land use planning policies, urban design, and community engagement. Wes holds a master's degree in community and economic development, is a 2009 graduate of the Community Development Institute, and a 2011 inductee into the American Institute of Certified Planners. He resides in Fayetteville, Arkansas with his wife and 7-year-old son, and is an avid cyclist and fly fisherman. Wes, we're so excited to have you here today. Welcome to Build Maine 2021, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Mandy. I can't tell you how big of a pleasure this is. I've been following Build Maine for several years. I am super impressed at all you all do up in the northeastern corner of this country. I think you're a leader in many ways, and you all have an awful lot to be proud of. I especially appreciate hearing all the announcements. It's exciting. It sounds like some growth is coming for Build Maine, and I'm just excited for you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation and the warm welcome. So I'm going to pull up my screen, begin sharing a presentation, but like Mandy mentioned, I try to keep these things pretty casual. I've taught a lot of school in the background. I love interruptions. If you have a question that needs to be answered quickly, I'm also very happy to make it a little bit conversational. So that can be done midstream. You can obviously hold your questions till the end and we can have conversations at that point. But all formalities aside, this is a pretty casual conversational event for me at every moment, and I want to invite you all to see it the same way. So here we go with the presentation. I'm going to start with just a couple of quick disclaimers. Number one, as you can tell, I'm on my back patio. It's a beautiful morning. I love it out here, but just so everyone is aware, there is, my cameras have moved around on me. There is some random noise sometimes. I hear a sprinkler over here, some birds chirping. Hopefully it's not too distracting. I please beg your pardon if so. We're also doing some construction, so I've asked them all to stay off for the next hour, but you know how construction sometimes goes. If anything's distracting, I beg your pardon, please. So let's jump in here. And final disclaimer, I'm going to talk about tax revenues and expenditures. That's fundamentally what this particular program is going to be about. I recognize first off that every community, every state, in fact, has different ways of collecting their revenue, and we're not all the same in that regard. So for example, Arkansas is heavy on sales tax. It's just the way our state legislation is structured. We are limited to 5 mills of property tax on ad valorem. But we get, most cities here in Arkansas, effectively all of us, get the bulk of our revenue from sales taxes. I'll talk primarily about property taxes and sales tax in this presentation, but I recognize obviously that some cities depend on income tax, some cities depend on excise taxes, some cities depend on a different fee structure altogether and are not tax dependent. So bear with me. I'm going to use Arkansas as an example, try to use it as a case study to make some correlations. If it's not exactly your tax structure, I still hope there's going to be some valuable lessons to be learned in this. Take what you can from it, adjust according to how you guys collect and spend your revenues, and hopefully you can make a difference in your community. So now that we've gotten our disclaimers out of the way, let me get going on my presentation here. So the story of my town, or my place in general. So I tend to think that Arkansas is a lot like Maine. In fact, we're both one of the nation's smaller states. We have relatively low populations relative to higher populous states in our union. Our population densities are pretty low because we're largely rural in nature. We have a endless supply of adorable villages and towns and smaller cities spread throughout that rural landscape. And we have just a couple of major metro areas. So the major metro area I'm from is a little bit major by Arkansas standards, not a megalopolis by any stretch, but our MSA is the Little Rock MSA, and my hometown is Conway, right here in the center of the state, more or less. I now live up in Fayetteville in the northwest corner, but Conway that's my roots, and that's where most of my professional career has been spent. So we're going to talk about Conway today. The story of Conway is the story of an agrarian area supported by a rail stop. It's the story of a lot of America, especially in the frontier west. Once you get to this side of the Mississippi, it's a different history than you all have. I recognize that. The trains dominated the landscape here, and we all depended on that depot, that rail stop, to thrive. That's where the farm to market took place, right? We were fortunate. We caught a few breaks along the way in Conway. So we had some visionary leaders. They started their own utility company, which thrives to this day, Conway Corporation, very powerful city-owned utility that can be leveraged for the benefit of Conway in innumerable ways. We picked up 2 colleges and a state university along the way. Used to be called Arkansas State Normal School, then it was Arkansas State Teachers College, now it's the University of Central Arkansas, but obviously a university in your town complemented by 2 colleges, there's a lot of education benefits to be reaped that pay long-term dividends. We timed an industrial park creation for the early to mid 20th century, that industrial boom, and the economy just skyrocketed. Eventually the interstate came just east of downtown. Thankfully it didn't come through our downtown, but wow, the benefits of having interstate traffic through your city obviously comes with some costs. I think we can all agree there, but economically speaking, Conway was like a rocket ship through the 20th century. We went from a tiny rail stop on a grid that was oriented to the rail to the state plane coordinate system. The grid turned north, south, east, west. We started breaking down into blocks by the mid 20th century, and by the latter half of the 20th century, it was gangbusters. We were starting to explode, but the population didn't really take off until the 1980s. So we can see here before and after images. Our landscape, the rate at which we were consuming landscape, grew. The rate at which we consumed the landscape grew because we were developing in a very suburban model, like most of America was in that era. And our population, of course, went through the roof starting in 1985, 1990, like many suburban communities. We are a suburb effectively of Little Rock. Conway's doing its own thing, but we're still a suburb of Little Rock. And yeah, our population really took off as Little Rock lost that population. But even through all of this growth, we never seemed to have the revenue we needed to sustain or even keep up with the growth in any way. We were busting at the seams with population, busting at the seams with education growth, healthcare growth, retail growth, entertainment, hospitality. Like, we had more growth than we knew what to do with, but we never seemed to have enough revenues in the city to keep up with all that rapid expansion, that spatial expansion. And so by 2010 or 2000, early teens, I was really trying to wrap my brain around why were we always making compromises with the budget when we had, I would always heard that if you're growing, you're thriving, right? As long as we're growing, we're going to have all of the tax collection, all the tax revenue we need, and we can do the streets, we can do the stormwater, we can do the sewer, water, electric, and the parks, and improve downtown and all of these quality of place. And we were doing that. Don't get me wrong. Conway's a fabulous city, but there were always demands that weren't being met. Our ability to deliver was not commensurate with the level of demand that the community deserved and desired, frankly. And there's that construction, and it's off. So I began to dig deeper on this issue. I really wanted to understand revenue collections and expenses, budget expenses, and really wrap my brain around where the money was going. So I started to dig deep. And I mean, for several years, I went really deep, like finance and accounting, wonky deep. I buried myself in tables and spreadsheets and charts to the point that I nearly drove myself crazy. I really learned a lot through the process about municipal accounting and finance, but I was having a hard time uncovering what was going on, finding the solution or finding the answers to my questions. Why the fundamental question here is, why were we creating a city like this? We were attracting large scale development, residential development, Class A office space that was packing full of working professionals, retail. All the national chains were coming, you know, your Home Depots and your Targets, and you see Quiznos here, but like the list goes on and on. Every national retailer was coming to our doorstep. I knew we were generating a lot of money, but why was it's never seemed to be enough to cover our costs. We had all this wonderful growth, or so I thought, but we still dealt with stuff like this every day, all the time. We're consumed by traffic. We're consumed by stormwater management challenges. We literally weren't fixing sidewalks. That's literally, we didn't have a sidewalk fund to repair broken sidewalks. Not an exaggeration. And I just couldn't figure out why. So as I dug in, I started to, you know, obviously I'm looking at total tax collections. Do we have enough? Are we generating new revenue? Is it consistent growth? Is it admirable growth? Are our property taxes and sales taxes climbing year over year? Absolutely. Like the money we're putting money on the board. So then it must be something else. Are we giving away abatements? Are there handouts here that are allowing people to, you know, especially under the guise of economic development? Are we giving away abatements? And we're giving away some, but I mean, a handful to major, you know, when there's coordination with the state or the economic development agency, maybe a few, but nothing that would account for the disparity between demand and supply on services and infrastructure. And so what else? Well, of course, if you're a skeptic like me, you ask hard questions about the government. Is there waste? Are there handshake backroom board deals going on? Is there favoritism between for certain projects, certain programs, certain departments in the city? No, and maybe. But that's politics, right? Like, it's okay for the elected officials to have things that are on their agenda, right? So maybe it's police and fire for one, maybe it's parks for another, maybe it's social services for another. So, you know, you see the money gets moved around, the money gets prioritized, no big surprise. It was never enough. We were never stacking dollars in one place to the degree that it was compromising our ability to provide services, infrastructure, and quality of place commensurate to demand the rest of the places. So yeah, I'm at a dead end. I mean, we're now in the mid 2000 teens, like 2015, 2016, 2017, and I can't figure this out. And I don't know really what triggered it, but it occurred to me that I was thinking about this the wrong way, y'all. I was thinking about this question two-dimensionally while staring at spreadsheets and charts and budgets. I was thinking about revenue and expenses in terms of point source revenue and point source consumption. And I recognize that's the wrong way for me to be thinking about how we pay for our city. There is a lot of value in thinking three-dimensionally and thinking spatially about revenue. And it's kind of like stormwater runoff pollution, stormwater pollution. We think about point source pollutions. These are the things with an exhaust pipe that are, or an outfall that are, you can track that pollution to that specific place, versus non-point source, which is like all the drops of oil across all the pavement in your community. When it rains, all that oil just finds its way downstream somewhere. All that pollution goes non-point source. I wanted to think about this non-point source. And so I stepped back away from all those charts and spreadsheets, and I started thinking about my community from a landscape performance point of view. And it was a huge aha moment for me. I stopped asking who are the providers of revenue in terms of individual retailers or individual, offices, or that powerful new tech park that's generating property taxes. And I started thinking about how do the zones of my community perform on the aggregate? How do certain built environments perform collectively on the aggregate versus others? And then the other end of that question is, how do they consume? How do various forms of my community, the various landscapes of my community consume on the aggregate? So I'm a farm boy. I was raised on about a 300-acre farm in a little community called Desart, east of Little Rock. My geography degree holder. I shouldn't make those type of errors. East of Little Rock, and I thought about the farm. I thought about how we managed the farm, and that's what brought me to the metaphor of crop yield, and that's what I preach a lot about right now in these settings. Everything, just like farming, everything in our community can be mapped spatially. What do I mean? I mean, it rests on the surface of the earth. Obviously, it has 3 dimensions, and we can study each from a performance point of view. So the same way that a farmer will map their own expenses and their own revenues by acre, asking the simple question of how many resources am I applying to this pasture or this landscape of mine at the time of planting and operations and maintenance, versus how much am I collecting in yield once I take that to market, right? I'm going to subtract all the resources invested. I'm left with my yield, and that's how I earn my living. Our city officials absolutely, positively must be asking themselves the same performance yield question with regards to how their landscape and their communities perform. Farmers do that because it's smart farming, and city officials need to do that because it's smart governing. So to be clear, when I talk about expenses today, I'm talking about expenses, as measured in area. So how much does my city spend per acre or per square mile on things like police and street and other infrastructure, parks and rec, whatever. That stuff matters, right? Because that's the stuff we all want as city residents. We love it. And the problem is it isn't getting any cheaper to provide these things. It's becoming more challenging inside City Hall to do the things your population needs, wants, and desires and deserves. Conversely, today, when I'm talking about revenues, again, talking about it spatially, not from a point source. So how much are we collecting per acre or per square mile? And we may dig a little bit deeper and even think about what are the forms on those landscapes and how do they connect to that revenue collected. I spent over a decade as a city planner being paid to think spatially, and yet I never thought spatially on this topic until this awakening, 5-ish or so years ago, 6 years ago. And now I can't stop seeing everywhere I go. I see my landscape. I'm a city admin, city management wonk in my heart. I love City Hall. I'm always thinking about communities that I visit from the staff or the administration point of view. I can't stop thinking about cities this way. I walk around, I wonder, how is this landscape performing? I wonder what sort of revenues they're leveraging and what sort of consumption rate this landscape, has. How efficient is it at performing, and can the city, is this being leveraged for its maximum impact, and can the city afford all of this? I think that's an important lens through which we see our cities. And I encourage you to see it through the same. So let's go a little deeper in Conway, and I'll talk about what I found as I started looking through that lens. So this is Walmart. Pardon me real quick. We're staring at Walmart while I take a drink here. So it's a little bit dry and I don't want to start coughing. Walmart. You may or may not have Walmarts in your community. Chances are you've been around one. You've been in communities that do. I think there's 10,000 of them all over the world. It's an insane amount. Almost in every community with a Walmart sees a Walmart as like an economic engine, and by no fault of their own. There's jobs inside of a Walmart. There are services that are being provided to your community members inside of a Walmart. And obviously there's a lot of tax revenue that comes from a Walmart. For a state like Arkansas that is heavily dependent on sales tax, Walmart is a powerhouse. Straight up, they generate a lot of sales tax. This is the Halter building. This building is over 100 years old. It's in the heart of our town center in Conway, and it's a beloved building. People love it. It's beautiful. I think it's very beautiful. That's subjective, but many people agree it is beautiful. And it's been there as long as literally any resident has been there now. It's outlived everyone. And like I said, it's beloved. There's been a number of retailers, a number of professional office spaces, a number of residential units come and go over the last 100 years. It is really, it has been responsible for cradling a lot of activity. And in the last century plus, it stood on the prominent corner in the heart of our town center. I don't think for sure in the modern era, the last 30 to 50 years, anybody really regards it as an economic powerhouse. It's beautiful and it's beloved and it does a fair amount of business. There's some restaurants and bars and like you heard me mention, some office space and some residential units, but nobody really thinks about the Halter building as a major point source of tax revenue. It's just another building supplying whatever it can supply. But I'm about to turn that upside down. You knew there was a punchline coming, right? So let's look at property taxes, the ad valorem. The city of Conway collects 3.1 of its allowed 5 mills. Conservative city council, they don't want to take all 5 mills of property tax available. They're happy keeping it at 3.1, gives them some room to grow in the future, but it also, they check the box on keeping tax rates low from a property tax point of view. Walmart has an assessed value of 2.2 million times 3.1 mills to the city. Walmart pays the city of Conway $6,600 a year in property taxes. Not huge. Sales taxes we'll come back to in a minute, but property taxes, for Walmart, it's reasonable. I mean, it's $6,000, right? But you'd think a Walmart would be more. Well, you'd think a Halter building would be less, and you'd be right. Halter building assesses at about a little under $500,000, the same millage rate for that property tax. And you can see the Halter building's paying its fair share, as everybody does, but significantly less on the dollar amount than Walmart, of course. Remember, we're talking yield. We're not talking about point source revenue. You won't. The city budget doesn't show you yield. So what does it mean from a spatial, a landscape point of view? Well, Walmart's on 23.5 acres. 82% of that is parking lot or landscaping. It is wholly unproductive. I'm going to pause right here, quick sidebar. That is entirely too much unproductive land in your community. I'm not throwing stones at Walmart, although it's easy to do. I guarantee you there are 100 other brands like Walmart in your community or in communities well in your region where 80% of the lot is unproductive. Guarantee you can roll through a Rolodex of images of streetscapes in your mind right now where only 20% of the landscape performs. And that's the wrong answer. We have to stop building America like that, you guys. Unproductive land. Again, I'm a farm boy. You better believe that my papa would never have allowed his farm to have 80% unproductive land. Sermon over, back to the presentation, but worth noting. Thank you. Halter building, on the other hand, it's on about 1/3 of an acre on that prominent corner, and it's 0% unproductive. As a matter of fact, it's not just 0% unproductive because it has no parking lot, no landscaping. It's 3 stories tall. So it's productive multiple times over. So what does this mean from a yield point of view? Walmart, as powerful as it is, yields $281 per acre in property taxes. The Halter building yields $4,000. So the Halter building is 15 times more productive on the landscape of my hometown than Walmart. So this got me like, this was the first examination I did in my community was Walmart versus the Halter building, just straight property taxes, lot for lot. And my mind was like, so now I'm off to the races. I am like staying up late. I'm turning into a geek for this stuff in my city. I wanted to see first things first, like, okay, so 23.5 acres. What does 23.5 acre Walmart look like against a 23.5 acre slice of my town center? So I did that. I came up with, we've already established $281 an acre for that Walmart. My downtown comparable area, 23.5 acres, a nudge over. $804 an acre in value. Now I need to point out right here that a large part of my downtown, I'm going to go back one so you can kind of see through the transparency. You'll see that within this particular boundary area, this roughly 23.5 acre boundary area, there's a lot of unproductive land. It's not all productive. There's a big parking lot up here. There's parking lots spread throughout. This is probably, I didn't do the math, but this is probably on the order of 60% productive-ish. Your guess is as good as mine looking at it. It's not 100% productive. Now, to be fair, a lot of these are 2- and 3-story buildings. Some of these a lot of them are 1-story. I can confirm that the vast majority of this street right through here, these few blocks are all 1-story. So it's not wholly productive like some town centers are that are built edge to edge and wall to wall. But even at that, it's like 3 times, more than 3 times as powerful from the property tax point of view. So now I'm like, okay, so how far does this go? I took that same slice of our downtown in downtown Conway, and I compared it to what is still the largest retail commercial establishment in the city of Conway. It's pretty brand new. It's less than 10 years old today. And it is a powerhouse. There's Target on the end. I think there's like a Kohl's and some other big boxes. There's some smaller retailers like the cell phone companies and some salons and shoe retailers and the like. This is, oh, it's on interstate frontage. This is really high power property tax stuff, you guys. This is definitely improved real estate in a highly visible area. With a very high assessments in terms of ad valorem property tax. I get it. We're outperforming an old Walmart, but do we outperform Conway Commons? The answer was yes. Again, by a pretty significant margin, in fact. So I started doing this all over town, and I found every zone, every corner of the city I looked at. I compared that 23.5 acre sample to everything I could find: the industrial park, the tech park, multifamily districts, obviously retail districts like you've seen here. I kept getting the same answer over and over. That little slice of our town center was outperforming literally every landscape that I did a examination on. I probably did 6 to 10 at the time. And so now I'm like, wow, okay, so effectively the case is made on property taxes. But remember, Arkansas is not a property tax dependent state. If I walk downstairs in City Hall and showed this to the mayor, I know exactly what he's going to say. He's going to say, Wes, good job in this little side project you got going on. Neat. But we depend on sales taxes, and Conway Commons and Walmart and our restaurants and on and on and on still outperform on sales tax. And he's right. Like we're a sales tax dependent state. So I don't have access. Arkansas state law does not permit access except, probably court subpoenas or the like. I can't get retailer sales tax data. But because the city of Conway collects prepared food tax, I can see what every hotel and restaurant is paying in prepared foods. And then I can interpolate that amount upwards against the broader city sales tax, county sales tax, and state sales tax. I can make immediate determinations just based on their slice for what we call the hamburger tax, the hospitality tax, food and bev, whatever you call it. I know what they're paying broadly just from that little slice of the data. So what do we find on sales taxes? So I started with Chick-fil-A. I don't know if you guys have Chick-fil-A's up there in New England. In the South, they are a big deal. If you've ever visited the South, maybe you've got friends and family in the South, it's a big deal, y'all. Chick-fil-A is a big deal. This Chick-fil-A on State Highway 64 in Conway, Arkansas is the highest performing restaurant in the city. Full stop. Does $4.4 million worth of gross receipts per year. That is a lot of money spent on chicken sandwiches, but it does it. Number one ranking, 4.5 million, and it takes up just under 2 acres. This is the Pasta Grill. It's in the heart of our town center in Conway. It is on 1/3 of an acre. It's locally owned. It's obviously a locally owned restaurant. Hope you can tell by looking. It's very beloved, fabulous little restaurant. It's on 1/20th of an acre. It has 0 parking. They take advantage of either public parking areas or the street parking. It does 1.1 million in annual sales, and it's ranked number 53. Virtually all of the fast food, by the way, in terms of gross receipts, outperforms, and all those casual dinings like your Chili's and your Applebee's and all those Olive Gardens, all those things, they outperform these local folks, unfortunately. And so what do? We find ourselves, because we're focused on point source revenue, we find ourselves at City Hall and the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Arm. We find ourselves building infrastructure, streets, and laying sewer, water, electric. We're giving them tax breaks sometimes, whatever. Like, we're catering to the national chains like Chick-fil-A and Olive Garden, whatever. Because point source, they're putting more money on the board. What we're failing to recognize, again, back to my broader thesis, is the performance of the landscape. Once we divide that 4.4 million in gross receipts by the almost 2 acres of state highway frontage and all the setbacks and all the landscaping and all the money we put into widening that state highway into a 5-lane arterial with all the street lights and everything you got to do to support the traffic of a Chick-fil-A, Chick-fil-A's yielding about $2.6 million in gross receipts per year, per acre. What do you think Pasta Grill's doing? 20th of an acre, no parking, mom and pop, locally owned in the heart of our downtown. $22 million per acre. You guys, just wrap your brains around that. Like, I was blown away. I couldn't get enough of this. I hope you can detect my enthusiasm for this topic. The yield matters. It matters so much. And what makes it even better is that it's our locally owned places that we love so much. That don't take anything away from Chick-fil-A. Got it. Good chicken sandwiches. People love it too. But man, Pasta Grill's better. It's just better. And so we get to take care of our locally owned establishments if we focus on yield. We'll come back. More on that in a minute. This yield gives you the performance you need to grow your school district, set up after-school programs, set up athletic programs, set up social programs, workforce development, homeless. This is where you get to build the sidewalks and the trails, the bike paths around your parks and schools where they deserve to be. It lets you buy all the shiny toys. Frankly, it's awesome to see the shiny new fire truck coming down during the 4th of July parade or Memorial Day parade or whatever your parade is in town, your town Christmas parade. It lets everybody know that we take our obligations for public service seriously when police and fire get the budgets that they deserve, and our street department gets the budget it deserves. So people stop ringing your phone about potholes. Like, we got the yield, we got the money, because we're drawing that revenue from a landscape in a different way. We're going to start prioritizing our landscape in new ways so that we can get the yield we need to meet the demand. Fundamentally, that's what we're obligated to do. We're all public servants here, right? Like, our job is to meet demand. Yield lets you do that much more powerfully than point source revenue. So before I went downstairs to the mayor and I'm like, check this out, I wanted more. And so I won't belabor all the little studies, the little case studies I did around my community, but right away I just said, what are the top 10 restaurants and the top 10 suburban restaurants and the top 10 urban, I'll call them urban, but they're just the restaurants in our town center. And of course, by now, you know what I found. Our big suburban national chains are doing $2.25 million an acre on average, and our downtown restaurants are doing $9 million an acre. What's even better about that, you know, you heard me mention, you know, we take care of local business owners when we focus when we focus the budget on them, the power of the budget on them. But we also take care of the historic district, right? Like the town center is where these 100-year-old buildings are, these beloved, nobody loves a Chick-fil-A building or a McDonald's or a Cracker Barrel or TGI Fridays or any of these things. Nobody cares about those buildings. They're disposable to begin with. They're built to be disposable, and they're going to run for 20 or 30 years, and someone's going to come along in the next life cycle and either completely remodel it or tear it down and rebuild that site. But downtown, that infrastructure has already been there serving your community for 100 years. It may be around for another 100 years. You get to use it over and over and over with that same infrastructure and the same service provision and the same quality of place assets. There's all these wonderful benefits. There's loads of wonderful benefits being downtown. I'll talk more about that in a second. So the burbs in the town center, I mean, this photograph alone tells you everything you need to know in terms of service and infrastructure efficiency. If I'm running a garbage truck down that street, how many homes can I service per linear mile versus the town center neighborhood on the bottom? If I'm laying sewer, water, or electric lines down that street, how many ratepayers connect to that line on the top versus the bottom? And the list goes on and on. I won't belabor the point. You get it. We get it. Like, you can look at a productive landscape and get it. This is super duper win-win stuff, you guys. Just like a farmer makes decisions about how he or she manages their landscape, right? Like, I'm going to learn which acreage performs at a high level. I'm going to learn which acreage performs at a low level. And I'm going to do more of this and less of this. We got to be doing this stuff in our cities, y'all. It's really not difficult. We just got to think like a farmer. Kind of the last thing I'm going to say here, even if this is all it was, like the performance of our landscape, it's worthy of doing. Again, I geek out on service. I love governing. I love it. I don't do it right now. I'm working in the nonprofit sector, but I can imagine a day I come back to governing. I'm very passionate about it. I'm in the National Guard also, so I like public service. I just like it. But even if it's beyond the efficient application of resources and the efficient collection of those resources, even if all we did was be good fiscal stewards of the resources the taxpayers trust us with, it's still worth doing. It's worth doing. For that reason alone, fiscal stewardship, efficient application and collection of resources, do it anyway. But it's more than that. Because what I discovered in the performance of my landscape brings me back to the town center over and over and over. Town centers have way more to give than just yield. They give diversity. Our town centers are where we find a rich mix of choice, goods, and services. These things happening in close proximity to one another. Downtowns, town centers, village centers, they're resilient. You heard me mention, these are buildings we love. They've been here for 100 years or more, and they may be here for another 100 or more. They get life pumping in and out of them generation after generation, supporting innumerable businesses and residents over the course, or events, or whatever you want to do with these buildings, but they're resilient. Town centers are resilient and adaptive. Culture, right? We have some neighborhood block parties in the suburbs, you guys. I mean, I do. We had an awesome one here. I live kind of in the suburbs. It's on the edge of the town center, but we have block parties here, but not like we have downtown. Downtown is where the action is. Town center is where we have our big festivals. It's where we have those parades you heard me mention. It's where people come to hang out. I've often said that the town center is like the living room of my city. It's where when guests come to town, we don't hang out in the suburbs. We go downtown, right? Downtowns are walkable. There's all sorts of benefits associated with walkability, you guys. The first one I love the most is walkability makes things accessible to those most in need. These are your youth. These are your elderly. Walkable means it is, it provides equity, mobility equity to people in need, maybe people who don't own a car either by choice or circumstance. It allows people to get to work or to school powered by their bodies instead of, the need to own a car, to purchase a car, or even drive a car, unless you're just really into driving cars. Walkable has so many benefits, and that's town center, y'all. Walkability also directly relates to public health. My wife is a doctor of public health. She studies this stuff constantly. We have really wonky conversations. You might be bored sitting at dinner with us, but we love it. Like the intersection of the built environment and public health, and what walkable communities, walkable town centers mean to lowering obesity rates, lowering heart disease, lowering diabetes rates. Like public health matters because those secondary and tertiary costs are long-term and they get absorbed by the public. Healthy communities is not only a more thriving, vibrant community, but healthy communities save money. And I'll go one beyond physical health. There's something about town center that brings us joy, right? There's an emotional health and a social health. That community bonding that happens in our town center has dramatic impacts to our emotional and mental well-being. So it's more than just physical health because we're walking or riding a bike. That emotional and mental piece is in part, I believe, for me, because our town centers are beautiful places. They're beautiful. I love town center. People have gone to town center, to the downtown, to urban places for millennia. And we consider places like Vienna and Barcelona and Paris and Rome. They're stunningly beautiful places. The center of our cities are often beautiful, and they speak to our soul and they speak to our heart, and we go there on vacation. And I shouldn't have to remind anybody, virtually nobody goes to the suburbs on vacation, y'all. Nobody. So we have all these amazing reasons why the town center matters. Today's presentation was about yield, but it goes way beyond that. Our landscapes matter deeply, not just from a budget point of view, but from a human point of view. And just like a farmer will look across that landscape and make decisions about how that landscape is performing, we got to be doing the same in our communities. Also of note, rapid expansion annexations. This farmer right here would not go out and buy more land before he maximizes the productivity of the current land he owns. So as you think about annexation, as you think about the outward expansion, and you obligate yourself to sewer, water, electric, police, fire, sanitation, schools, libraries, parks, the whole thing, whatever of those things your community pays for, every time you expand, you buy new land, you pick up some new pasture space, you're doing so at a cost. Operations, maintenance, infrastructure, service cost. I want to leave you with the final note of be thoughtful as you annex, as you expand your governing boundary for your community. Do so only after you're ensuring maximum productivity from that which you're already obligated to. That to which you're already obligated. Sorry, my mom's English teacher, and that would ending with a preposition would harp on her. Yeah, get right what we're already doing before we keep growing. And then when we do start growing, let's think about it in terms of yield. Let's make it better. We can do better. I encourage you all to do better, myself included. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. And I hope you gained something out of the presentation, and I am wide open for questions. So
thank you so much, Wes. That was fantastic. Just before we jump into questions, I just want to give you a huge thanks. That was super interesting. I started looking up tax maps and assessors database while you were talking. So to our attendees, video and presentation materials will be emailed to you within the next week. So be sure to check this one out. And if you know someone that didn't get a ticket to Build Maine, they can access these materials if they buy a ticket for the next 60 days. So just keep that in your mind. Thank you for submitting questions during the event. I'm going to open it up first, I think, to people who want to speak their questions. So if you could raise your virtual hand, and then we'll ask you to unmute, and then we'll go through the list of questions that we have in the chat. So yeah, if anybody has something to say, please. If not, then we'll just start right in. Okay, there's a lot of questions in the chat, so let's go for those. So first off, are you, I believe this was when you were doing the Walmart versus the downtown 23 acres. Are you removing public streets from this downtown conversion?
No, you heard me mention that I didn't adjust anything on that town center area. So empty lots, streets, and lower productive vacant buildings, even in fact, they were all included. So I didn't trim that data. I wanted to see 23.5 acres versus 23.5 acres.
Okay. So this is an observation that I'd love, your reaction to. So I'm going to just read it. In a way to look at it, municipalities are subsidizing large square footage of retail space, aside from the obvious parking lot space. Retailers needing lots of square footage to offer their inventory and bulk purchasing. A variety of purchasing goes up, cost of goods goes down, versus smaller boutique stores. But are the real costs accounted for? Cost savings to the consumers, yes, but is it smart consumption, packaging, landfill unaccounted for over here? There are lots of hidden numbers in the math that fills out the story and the cost to the community. Is it worth having 45 SKUs of potato chips and 80 cents a bag reduction?
Great observation. I think that those are important questions to ask for sure. It's not, I mean, I'm thinking about efficiencies and models and paradigms as they relate to City Hall, but those are absolutely important questions we should be asking about the entire marketplace. I think we should be asking a lot of hard questions about how America grows and operates right now. I'll give you a quick example. You heard me mention that my wife works in public health. She works primarily in food systems. She talks all the time about how we do two things well in America. We do large scale food production, aggregation, processing, distribution. I mean, like train loads of commodity products. We do large scale very well, and we do boutique level pretty well. Many of your towns probably have a farmer's market. You can swing by the farmer's market. Maybe the chefs at the restaurants in your community can go by the farmer's market, get hyper locally sourced foods and deliver them right there at the kitchen table or in the restaurant. We do boutique pretty well. We're missing a middle, and that brings up the thought of like missing middle housing. There's a lot going on in America right now. We've gravitated towards this industrial model, industrial scale through the 20th century. We're starting to see this boutique movement, really powerful boutique movement across all sectors of the economy. We're not doing the middle very well. So I think questions and observations like this are important to think about the paradigms that we live in, to ask hard questions of our service providers and try to do better.
Yeah, and if you didn't catch Dan Perolik, he is sort of a proselytizer of missing middle housing. It's probably not the right word, but he spoke on June 2nd about just that. So check that out, definitely. Another question, I think this came from Jane. When we did this analysis in Rockland, Maine, one reaction from the top producer / highest yield was that he was being overtaxed because the big boxes were being taxed less per acre. Have you heard that pushback to your logical and persuasive argument?
No, I haven't. So I think it's all just based on tax rate, right? I mean, I can tell you that every city I'm familiar with has a standard rate, right? They don't change the rate. In the state of Arkansas, I don't think it's even permissible. Some states are, the land value or split value taxation. Some states, Arkansas is not one of those. So everybody gets taxed at the same rate. And that's something that the elected officials can kind of hang their hat on, right? Like, I get it on a yield point of view. You're a higher performer. Maybe you think there should be some benefits associated with being a high performer. I think those are important questions to have in your community. And if there are ways to incentivize those types of business owners or those types of property owners to be higher performers, run with it. Those are great conversations to have in your community. But as far as the communities I'm familiar with here in the state of Arkansas, and definitely in my own communities, that tax rate is stable across the board, and everybody's getting with the same rate. Everybody's paying the same rate, not amount. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I guess the next step in this conversation, or in that question too, is like, what do you do about it? This is my question.
Yeah. So you heard me mention split value taxation. That's something. It happens in England. UK does split value taxation. There are a few states in our union that do it. I want to say that Washington, Massachusetts, maybe. I think Tennessee. Maybe I'm getting transfer development rights confused. Nevertheless, split value taxation, what it does, Mandy, is from a property tax point of view, it allows you to break apart vacant parcels and tax them at a different rate than what you tax improvements. So the way we do it right now in the state of Arkansas, the way most states do property tax is that you have the same rate, irrespective of whether there are improvements or not. For the city of Conway, you saw it was 3.1 mils. That rate is stable. What happens is that we punish people for building on a vacant lot. If productive landscapes is what we want, we need to be building on vacant lots, right? Something's going to happen on that new building that will be performing, right? Maybe it's a residence, but maybe it's the pasta grill, doing 20 million an acre in yield. Whatever it is, we want people to build, yet we punish them when they construct something because they were going to assess their property tax based on the improvement. Now we punished them for doing what we want them to do. It's crazy. And so what's happening with split value conversation right now is the ability to break those two apart, where you can assess a higher rates in parts of your city where you want more built environment, more producers. You tax vacant parcels at a higher rate. So maybe hypothetically you get 10 or 20 mils property tax on a vacant land in the heart of your town center, because you're providing, it's a disincentive for speculative landowners to just hold on to a vacant land, to a vacant piece of property. So now they've got an incentive to offload it to a developer, right? Or develop it themselves. The moment it's developed, when that real estate is improved, they pay a lower rate. Now they could bring them back down to that 3.1 mils or that 5 mils. So we reward them for creating a high performing landscape. That's one example of what we can do. We're not allowed to do that in the state of Arkansas. We're what's called a Dillon's rule state. So the only thing cities are allowed to do is that which the state legislature allows us to do. And right now the state legislature of Arkansas doesn't allow split rate taxation, but the conversation's begun. I like to think in a generation or two, the political will be there, and things like split rate taxation and transfer of development rights. Urban growth boundaries is another pretty out there thing that's being done. It's not without costs. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But anyway, there are some tools that our communities can be using here in the state of Arkansas, maybe in the state of Maine, that we're not currently allowed to use. But have those conversations anyway, get that ball rolling. And like you're talking about affecting state legislation through your organization and Build Maine, super awesome. Like build the advocacy, start the conversations down at the state capitol, and who knows what'll happen.
Right. Who knows? Yeah, on that note, Build Maine, I'm going to drop a link in the chat. If you're interested in past Build Maines, we had Rick Ryback speak about sort of that topic more generally. So check that out. But our next question, let me just find, did you value any nuisances? So I don't know if, no.
Now, and you heard me mention that I don't have, from a property tax point of view, if I'm just looking at a major strip center or a slice of our town center, there's all kinds of stuff going on in there. From a sales tax point of view, I couldn't do it. You heard me mention state law prohibits me from seeing sales tax revenues for retailers only because of that hamburger tax or the prepared food tax or whatever you want to call it. Was I able to see restaurants? So what I'm doing is I'm making some inferences between the power of restaurants on sales tax and some assumptions that I can neither confirm nor deny because of state law, but some assumptions on what retailers must be doing as well. I would love nothing more than to dig in more deeply on that. And if I were paid to do this work, I would probably find alternative methods for digging deeper. I want to peel back more layers of that onion, but I didn't for my year. I just was trying to get a high level look to start a conversation downstairs in the mayor's office, get a conversation going with my city council, be influential, and then go back to my day job because I wasn't paid to do any of these studies. I was trying to start new. I'm a disruptor around city, or at least I was back when I was City Hall. I was a disruptor.
The best kind. Okay, so did you include any embodied energy in downtown buildings and or lifespan of the chain/strip development building?
Again, I didn't go. I would love to peel back more layers. I think there's way more data, and let every community is different. How you collect, how you spend, the performers on your landscape by brand, local, national, whatever. Everybody's different. What I'm asking you to do is, I don't have all the answers. What I'm encouraging you to do is start thinking about yield. Start doing the budget. Start looking at your budget, both resources and expenses, or revenues and expenses. Start looking at your budget through this lens and decide for your own community what matters, and highlight those things for yourself, because we're all going to be a little bit different in how we get there. But think yield, think performance of your landscape. Yep, next question.
Yeah. Do you have yield number for various residential districts?
I did do that. I didn't include it in this presentation. Hugh, I'm sorry, I'll call you out here. So Hugh, I did not do that for this presentation. The vast majority of Conway's residential districts are conventional suburbia. We do have a wonderful downtown historic district, much more dense, a lot of missing middle because it predates World War II. That's how we built our communities, on the grid system, much more dense. But the majority of the landscape was built since World War II, and it is pretty conventional suburbia. A lot of curvilinear streets, lots of cul-de-sacs, a lot of quarter acre and larger lots with 1,500 to 2,500 square foot houses predominantly, depending on the era they were built. And I can tell you, I did the numbers on those, and it's abysmal. It doesn't even begin. Subdivisions like that, conventional late 20th century era suburbia, does not even begin to pay for itself. It's not even kind of close. They're a drain on your community, full stop. And I would be willing to wager that virtually all of America is telling the same story. We know they're not collecting excise tax, sales taxes. They're not doing any income taxes. It's vast swaths of residential landscape. So what are we getting on property taxes? For us, because we're limited on property taxes, it's not even close. They're consumers of the budget, not performers of the budget. I know Maine, you guys depend on property taxes in a big way. It's much different from a state structure point of view. Your yield analysis may produce different results. And if it does, that's your story in your community, and use that data to the ends that you desire.
So next question, this is a multi-part. How has this changed your land use regulation so you can improve crop yield?
Yeah.
Does the town zoning allow for buildings like building your old downtown? We love our historic districts, but no zoning allows that fabric to be built today. And historic districts are all non-conforming in most communities.
Yeah, good line of questioning, Tim. This is like, okay, what'd you do with the information, right? That's the governing piece. Yeah, we did a lot. I'm no longer with the city of Conway. I left a couple of years ago, moved to Fayetteville, start this Urban Land Institute chapter up here. But I left Conway proud. It's not just me. We had a team, awesome planning staff, awesome chamber. They get it over at our chamber. Our downtown association gets it. Thankfully, the mayor and council get it. And so a little update on the city of Conway before, during, and after this analysis. And I was able to present more or less the same presentation to my mayor and council in a formal way. Before, during, and after this, things were already moving in the right direction, and they continue to be to this day. So lots of adjustments to the zoning ordinance as it relates to our town center. High level thing like wave tops. What are we doing? We got rid of parking minimums. There are no parking minimums. So there's that. We opened the door. We didn't approve a true form-based code, but it's much better than the Euclidean zoning that existed for our central business district prior to. So we were able to do some transecting in the heart of our downtown and apply a pattern book, not really form-based code. It's not really regulating plan. We didn't get into street cross sections. We didn't quite have the ability to get over that But we did get some transecting done. We did get a pattern book approved that really opened the door to that pre-war model of town center development. And it was, I think it's been a big benefit. We also attracted, one of our colleges wanted to do an urban project. So we developed a T&D, a traditional neighborhood development ordinance, in concert with that developer that not only got that new urban project going on the edge of our town center, but now that T&D ordinance can be adopted by other developments. So if anybody else wants to build a new urban type project, the city now has a document, they're off to the races. We had 28 blocks just adjacent to our town center that was really fallow. It really got hammered in the mid 20th century, a lot of condemned buildings, a lot of vacant lots. I mean, it's immediately adjacent to the vibrant part of our town center, but it was fallow. And it actually was in between where one of our private colleges are. And so right now what's happening, it's been a 10-year process, but that 28 blocks is under redevelopment. The city's going in with stormwater infrastructure, brilliant stormwater infrastructure. They bought a lot. They're doing this beautiful wetlands that can flood during times of heavy raining, that prevents flooding downstream in the heart of downtown, but serves as an awesome water feature. There's like an outdoor event space. It's beautiful, new streetscape. And with that comes the activation of the zoning changes and hopefully a lot of private investment throughout that neighborhood, a future neighborhood. Right now it's largely vacant, but yeah, great stuff going on downtown. And I have to believe that in some small way, the conversation that we had here about yield and performance has influenced and will continue to influence the decisions that the leaders in Conway make in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to hand it over to Kara. I have to move myself, but Kara, do you want to ask the next question?
Sure. Hi, everybody.
Hey, Kara, good to see you again.
You too. Jane had a couple of great comments here. Maine doesn't annex in most cases, but we do sprawl within our municipal boundaries, and the arguments you made still apply. And the benefits that are provided to high performers might be trash pickup, snow plowing, publicly subsidized parking, etc.
That's right. I don't think about snow plowing down here in Arkansas, but that's a great point. Yeah.
Yep.
All those laps. We did it. So we worked with our GIS person on the trash pickup. I mean, like right before I left City Hall, we were doing some data analysis. We had a new director at the Department of Sanitation, and we run recycling and we run refuse pickup and leaf pickup, like yard waste pickup. So there are at least those three circulations happening 6 days a week in the city of Conway. And it's like, how can we use the GIS system against all of these linear miles that have to be covered, each one of which, each cycle ends with a trip all the way back to the landfill for, recycling, yard waste, and refuse, general refuse. And then the truck's got to go back across town to that neighborhood again. Like, again, landscape performance, focus specifically on the circulation of those vehicles. And what does that mean to labor hours, fuel, and maintenance obligations of those trucks? Not to mention, the exhaust and what that means to air quality and the like. Those are big trucks. Like, we got geeky on that stuff, you guys. Like, how can we use the GIS system of this community, the road network, to make sure that our trash, recycling, and yard waste trucks and street sweepers and the like, snow plows, are operating on the most efficient, routes, that every time they come and go, they're touching the most service, the most number of residents on every trip. Again, think about it in terms of performance. Your landscape is a performer. It's a consumer or provider, but it's always performing on your behalf. So get wonky on this stuff. There's all kinds of problems to be solved. Sorry, go ahead, Karen.
I know the public works folks across Maine are really in tune with that and are great allies and partners in digging into that information.
Good.
Buzz Lamb asks, have you ever analyzed the variety of jobs, use of local vendors, and reinvestment in the community by local businesses versus national chains?
Probably work that gets done down at the chamber. So I didn't, even though my academic background is economic development, I would love to explore that stuff. As a professional, I'm focused on the built environment and land use. I have to believe that our chamber and the Conway Development Corporation, which is our economic development branch there in the city, it's actually part of the chamber, and probably at some very high level, the Arkansas Economic Development Commission is probably, they're probably sorting through data, trying to answer questions like that, Buzz, but I never did in my work.
And then Ann just comments in response to Buzz that she had the same question, the economic ripple effect, and in her town, the arrival of McDonald's caused 2 locally owned businesses to close. I'm not sure what town that is, but
I'm laughing at Carrie's. I've skipped ahead in front of you. My reaction. I'm not reacting. It's a good point, Ann. I'm not smiling because McDonald's closes 2 businesses. That's the story across America, and it absolutely we need to ask hard questions about that stuff. I'm smiling at Carrie, who I know from Arkansas circles back in the day, and it's terrible, Carrie. So we have the #1 college baseball team in the country, and North Carolina State just beat us. They just beat us fair and square. The best pitcher in the country, the best team in the country, #1 seed going into the College World Series, and we got eliminated in our own backyard at the Super Regionals. Our college baseball team is done, and it's absolutely the talk of the town, and everybody's heartbroken. You can't go anywhere without saying, hearing people just heartbroken, Carrie. Glad to know you're still paying attention, though. Good to see you on.
And then we have Tim Wells again. Thanks so much and for the prior comment. And so how much public engagement did the city undertake, and how did you go about the public engagement?
Yeah, so a lot. I have to give so much credit to the city of Conway because they do public engagement well. They take it seriously. The city has different mayor now, but the mayor that I worked for was always out front, super engaging, wide open to conversations with the residents and business owners, a partner to virtually everyone in town. And I can't say enough about having strong leadership like that, that's always looking for ways to improve the community. City council was always listening. They were the same. They were open. There's just a culture, an open culture in the city of Conway, and that political climate matters so greatly. It's a city of 70,000 now, but it still kind of behaves like a small town. Everybody knows everybody. You bump into one another at the grocery store. You see each other at church. Your kids play soccer, baseball, whatever, together. There's still a lot of small town feel, a lot of cooperation on this stuff. And it was this, like anything else we're doing to make the community better, was well received. People absorb it. They acknowledge it, and in varying degrees, they embed it into their decision making going forward. And yeah, it was great. And when I presented, it was a formal presentation. It was recorded and rebroadcast. It's still out there on the internet right now, and I'm hopeful that future generations of city leaders in Conway hear it. I'm hopeful that future generations of city leaders everywhere hear it. That's why I'm talking to you guys today. I love this message, and yeah. If you can put it out there on YouTube, you can talk about it on your social media page. You can talk about it over cocktails. Like, talk about it. Start conversations. Disrupt. It's good stuff.
Wes, this is a question I have. So, one of our Build Maine alumni speakers is Allie Thurman Quinlan, and she lives and works in Fayetteville. So what are you doing now in Fayetteville that you learned? What lessons have you brought forth?
Yeah, starting conversations and disrupting, Mandy. Doing what I always do. I'm doing it a different way. Obviously, I'm not representing City Hall anymore. So what that allows me, for those of you all that don't know, the Urban Land Institute is an 85-year-old nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. We are dedicated to helping communities thrive. Fundamentally our mission. We do that through education and growing a powerful network. So ULI not only has its own research centers at headquarters up in Washington, D.C. that are pumping out information on emerging trends and best practices for policy and the built environment. But ULI also has partners at very high level across the country and across the globe, in fact, that we partner with around research and publication and educating both the public and private sector in a better built environment. So that education piece happens, and then we have the networking piece. We have 45,000 members worldwide at ULI. Here in Northwest Arkansas, we're approaching 100. We're the newest district council. We're just a little over a year old here in Northwest Arkansas, but we're growing rapidly because people love to connect. You don't have to be a dues paying member to ULI to come to most events, by the way. People love to connect and talk about their built environment, and they want to make it better. They want to shape it for the better. And ULI provides that. We're that roundtable where the public and private sector can come together. So the public sector being staff, officials, elected leaders, the private sector, of course, primarily development community, the design community, folks like Allie, but also like, you get real estate lawyers and commercial title work folks and, brokers and tenant reps and yeah, everybody in the private sector. ULI gives space. We all come out of our industry discipline foxholes and we talk across the landscape about the landscape. And it's just a wonderful way to have conversations about what matters in the community as it relates to the built environment. And as necessary, ULI then grabs our flag and we influence. Sometimes we advocate, we disrupt a little bit. And so leaving City Hall lets me do that, lets me break away from my commitment to serving my residents and think about serving the community of people who shape my landscape, shape our landscape, right? And so I get to serve the decision makers. I get to serve the doers now, not just my citizens. The citizens are still being served, but obviously in a second or third order way. ULI is a lot of fun, and that's our role. It's not just here, Fayetteville. Our metro area is a little over 500,000 here in Northwest Arkansas. It's rapidly growing, corner of the heartland. I would go on and on. If you ever get the chance to spend some time in Northwest Arkansas, it's worth the stop. It's incredible here. Fayetteville in particular is my favorite. It's my new home, but there are about a half dozen cities in the metro area here, all of which are thriving, and then a lot of smaller communities around that really add to the fabric. And yeah, it's just a fun place to help grow.
That's great. Well, I do want to leave it open for questions if anybody has one last burning one, but we just want to thank you again for coming today and, virtually. We'd love to have you in Maine next year, maybe come to the conference. But thank you so much for this engaging conversation today. I know that you've given us a lot of food for thought, and I think people will be bringing it back to their own communities, myself included. So
once again,
anyway,
thank you. Seriously, this is an honor. I'm a big fan of what you all are doing at Build Maine. I think 49 other states need to be paying attention to you all right now at Build Maine, because you're a collective of doers and you're improving your state in a big way. So keep up all the great work. I'm going to pay attention. If I can ever get up there for the conference in person, you better believe I'll accept the invite, and I look forward to meeting you in person. Until then, I'll be watching. Keep it up.
Thank you. Yes. Again, in the in-person conference next year, please nominate your city. We'll get you details on how to do that in the follow-up email. So keep an eye out for that. Be sure to, register for our emails. There we go. Thank you to everybody. I just want to say a huge thank you again to our sponsors. Build Maine 2021 would not have been a success without you. So we really appreciate it. I think Cashel's going to drop the final continuing education credit link in the chat. And if you have any other burning questions, feel free to email us at connect@builds-maine.com. Again, thank you, Wes, and hope you have a great rest of your day.